Well, dear hearts, it's a little bit after 1, and we have a quorum anyway. Glad you all are here today. We
Oh,
have
hello.
hello. Can you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Hear you, Gary. You're on. Good work. um,
Can you hear me?
yes. Can you hear me? Apparently not. Um, we have the special joy of a special guest, and we're going to talk about the term paper assignment for this class. Like to talk about it early, and then we'll talk about it often as we go through. And the reason for having Ms. Ellison here is that she is the writing coach for Simmons College. She has been an English teacher. She's been a journalist, and a person of some fame in Louisville, I believe, but I haven't been able to trace that down yet.
You haven't checked you haven't checked post office posters, have you?
Never looked at those, right?
She's wanted.
Well,
So the first piece of business is since she's here, I want to give her a chance to talk about what services she can offer you to help you write and prepare and turn in a solid college level, A level paper, which is of course what I'm looking for at the end of the semester. So you see the names here, and Ms. Ellison, let's turn it over to you at this point.
okay. Well, most of you or some of you are old friends, and I'm glad to see you again. I'm prepared to tell you what I'm prepared to do to help, but I'd like to start, if I could, by asking you how you'd like me to help. What do you think I ought to do? What would be helpful to you in terms of what I can do with your papers?
With mine, basically, I'll probably touch bases with you on how my sentences are done, make sure they're not running over one another. Uh, Punctuation, uh, just really the basics in writing, like we went over last time.
Okay. Well, let me talk for a minute about how, if I were planning how we'd work, this is what I'd suggest. First of all, when you want to reach me, I would be grateful if you would use email. You can use either the Simmons email, or you can use the my Becca Bill Gmail address, and tell me what's a good number to reach you and what's a good time. And I will make every effort I can to try to call you then. I prefer you not use the cell phone, because I don't have a good relationship with my cell phone. And second, because there's a pretty good chance you'd call when I was working with somebody else. The more important question is when you call. Okay, you've got this assignment. You've got research to do. And so the question is, when do you call me? Lucretia, you know the answer to this question. And she's grinning, and Walter knows the answer too. You come see me before you start writing. True? Come see me before you start writing, because the first thing you do after you've done your research is what? Walter, Lucretia, anybody? Hey, Kim. Hey, Stephen.
Rough draft.
No, 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 no. You know better than that. The very first thing you do is you think.
Oh,
You knew that. You knew that. See, he's worn the top of his head off thinking. And this is how you start. And that's where I can be useful because almost all writers benefit from being able to talk about what they've got to write before they start writing it to help with the thinking phase. Kim, was that a nod? No, she's disappeared.
Yes, I agree. No, oh my goodness, my people. Look at God. Okay.
Okay, so you've done your research, you've read the assignments, you know what you've got to do. And so then you call good old Miss Linda and you say, I need to think. And I'm really good at listening to you think. Almost all writers I know appreciate having a chance to talk through what they are going to do before Malik's nodding, before they get started. And you know, I'll listen and I will suggest or ask questions. Sometimes I'll argue with you. Is this true? Yes. To make you go deeper. And for many people, that's really useful. And the process of talking through it, we basically come out with an outline. And once you've got your outline and once you've decided what it is you want to say, then you've got a thesis statement. And from there on, it's just a matter of plugging in the reasons and the support for your thesis statement. And it becomes much, much more easy than if you just sit down and start writing. Now, I say that having spent 50 years, God help us, 50 years using words to put beans on my table. So it helps to write, talk to someone ahead of time. So I hope you'll use me for that. Then after you get a first draft, come see me again. You can email me your paper, the draft. Now, you should never, ever be embarrassed by what you send me, particularly when it's a first draft. I have a favorite author who has an entire chapter entitled, now, if you're offended by their bad words, you don't know what this word means, I'm sorry. The chapter is called Shitty First Drafts. And that means is everybody's first thing you put on paper is bad. That's just the way it goes. And by the way, that's why you don't turn that first draft in. I've heard it said that the difference between a good photographer and a bad photographer is a good photographer doesn't show anyone his bad work. And the same is true for writers. Everybody in this group has got a good writer inside. Just don't let people see what that good writer does first. So you come to me with your first draft and we'll talk about it and I will make some suggestions. And no matter how good it is, I will have suggestions because that's the kind of person I am. I'm trouble. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. So, and then when you finish writing, if you want to send it to me again, we'll go through the fine tuning, the grammar and the sentence structure and so forth. But by the time you get to your final draft, it ought to be pretty darn good. And you will see Professor Sawyer dancing and singing when he reads it. That, by the way, is worth doing.
That's on my bucket list now.
You won't have.
Yeah.
You may
So,
not finish your dead.
So that's how I would like to help. I'd like 3 times for an assignment. I'll do my very best to be available when it's good for you. My old person's brain tends to go off duty not very long after supper time. But if you can only meet at night, we'll meet at night. But I don't take responsibility for the old person's brain.
What's the earliest, if you don't mind? I hate to interrupt.
Well, if I had my druthers, it wouldn't be before 7.
Yeah, okay.
You know, officially I open shop at 9. Officially, I would probably go off duty at 5, but I will do whatever I can to be available. I know, you know, some of you have jobs and families, and life is real, life is earnest. So I'll try to be available when you need me. I'll do my very best. Sundays, I try to reserve for family, but if you've got to need help in a hurry, I'll do my best then too. I've got to tell you that wait until the last minute is not a true emergency. But you know, you're talking to someone who understands deadlines, so we'll make it work. Questions, arguments, problems so far? How are we doing? Now, if we were at Simmons, I'd bring cookies, and I regret with all my heart that I cannot ply you with cookies. But you know, that will be another day soon, I hope. A couple small things. One is everybody understands spell check. Have you got it?
Yep.
Folks.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you saying no?
No, yes, yes,
I
ma'am.
understand spell check.
Everybody understands spell check.
Yes.
Spell check can be a fooler because it can tell you the wrong word. Spell check is a wonderful, wonderful thing, but don't get fooled. And it's really easy now to check spell check because all you have to do is define the word, paste it into your search engine and define, and it'll tell you. And it'll also help you, you know, if you've got a word that's even too complicated for spell check to guess what you mean, put it in that search engine, and it helps a lot. That, by the way, I'm telling you my personal secrets because I cannot spell. My spelling almost ruined my life, and the internet is a wonderful thing. The other thing, of course, is grammar check. Grammar check does not always give you the right answer, and it does not always spot the right problems, but it tells you something to look at a second time. So it's worth doing. It's worth paying attention to. We all know what's grammar check. We got it. Word.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I think that you are starting to work on your reading, your references before you talk to me. So let me give you one piece of advice, which is everything you look at in connection with this paper, write down the source, the information you would need if you were going to need a reference. Who wrote it, where it is, what its title is, the date, the publisher, and the pages. If you have that much, you could find it again, and you can write a good reference list, and you can write a citation, in-text citation. The reason I suggest that you write it as you go is because I don't know about you, but in the middle of the night, sometimes I will discover that I remember something that suddenly is going to be good and that I thought I wasn't going to need, so I didn't write it down. And so now I've got to find it again. That is just a rotten feeling. And so a really good way to prevent plagiarism, accidental plagiarism, and a really good way to prevent having those kind of middle of the night, uh-oh moments is to write it down as you go. The other thing I would suggest is as you are taking notes, if you take notes by hand, which is the way we did it in the old days, but if you take notes by hand, be sure to be very clear for yourself on what is a direct quote, what is somebody else's words, and what is your summary. Some really big time historians get themselves in trouble by taking notes and taking notes and taking notes, and they come to writing and they pick up something that they think is their summary, but no, when the thing gets into print, somebody else says, you're using my words there. And then you have a big time plagiarism problem that has sunk some very famous people's ships. You are smarter than they are. You do not have to do that. So be careful when you take notes. What's your words? Get a system for yourself. When I write down somebody else's words, I put quotation marks and I circle them. And when I'm using my own words, sometimes I use a different color ink. But the main thing is be real sure when you're writing down somebody else's words. What else would be helpful? Have I said anything that's helpful yet?
Absolutely.
Yes, you have.
Because
Okay.
I've come to realize on that one topic you have discussed about plagiarism that I usually would write in my opinion, in my judgment, if it's my own words, or if not, if I'm going to use somebody else's words, like you say, give them the credit for it, put their name in there.
That's right. Remember that when you're using somebody else's words and when you're using somebody else's ideas, or when you're using somebody else's information to support your opinion, you need to cite it. Now, if you, Walter, you were at the workshop we did last week on Amanda Gorman. And everybody has an opinion. She's the poet. She was even at the Super Bowl, if you remember. Everybody has an opinion on Amanda Gorman, which is great. And you don't need to cite your opinion. But if you say, I think Amanda Gorman, the 22-year-old poet who was the youngest poet ever to speak at a presidential inauguration, is terrific. And I especially like her use of a certain kind of meter, or using the kind of meter that came from Hamilton, which she does, by the way. Okay, now you've used a whole lot of facts to support your opinion that didn't come from you. You didn't get up in the morning knowing those things. So now you come to a point where you need to cite them. They're your words, it's your conclusion, but you're supporting it with facts from somebody else. You'll never get in trouble with Professor Sawyer by citing two. You can get in a whole lot of trouble with Dr. Caldwell and other people high up if you don't cite enough. You don't have to be trying to plagiarize in order to do it. You can be trying not to plagiarize, and making a stupid mistake will get you in hot water. And there's some really big time famous historians like Doris Kearns Goodwin, who is appearing on all the news shows as a presidential historian, making gobs and gobs of money. And then she made a mistake in one of her books, and failed to give credit to someone whose words she used. And she was off every one of those news shows overnight. That mistake cost her thousands and thousands of dollars. And she spent the last 10 years trying to work her way back to being a respected historian. So, you know, we can talk about the sad tale of Ivanka Trump. Do you remember when she gave the speech that was plagiarized from Michelle Obama?
Mhm.
I mean, you can be ridiculed around the world by 10 billion people for plagiarizing. So it's a really good idea. Just, Malik, are you shaking your head? Can't hear you.
Oh yeah, I'm just thinking like, yeah, just shaking my head like that's terrible.
It
Like
was.
that's terrible.
Yeah, it was really sad. You know, I think she was trying to compliment Michelle Obama by doing it, but it was so dumb. Her staff let her down. But the point is, she didn't mean to do it that. She didn't mean to plagiarize, but she did. Oh, yes, and she paid. And I'm sorry to say that you would too. So keep track of where you're getting your info. That's my moral today.
Can I ask for clarification, two things? One is, how would you define plagiarism? And what are the consequences if you are caught plagiarizing in a major way in a paper you write and submit at Simmons College?
Okay. Plagiarism is any time you use words or an idea that belong to somebody else and you take credit for them. You take credit for them by including in your paper without citing them. You can plagiarize in a PowerPoint, in an oral presentation. You can do it in a paper. Anytime you use something that's not yours. And you know yourself how it feels when somebody takes credit for something you've done. It stinks. And so we don't want to do it. We cite things. Now, Simmons uses APA style, and APA style suggests all sorts of things you need to do. The most important one is citing and the reference list. The fact that you've got a source in your reference list but didn't cite it doesn't make up for not citing it. You've got to cite it where you use it, and you've got to include it in your reference list. We good with that so far, Professor Sawyer?
True, and the word is CITE, cite. And what is a cite? What is a citation?
Citation.
Did somebody say something?
Stephen, was that you?
I thought I was on mute. I was taking a song.
Oh, taking a call. Okay.
Okay. I'm going to do a workshop on plagiarism probably next week. This week, we're doing a workshop on writing sentences. Next week will be probably plagiarism, unless the group really wants to do something different. So every Wednesday at noon on Zoom, I have a workshop, a writing workshop, short, don't have to do any real work except thinking. But next week, we'll probably deal with plagiarism, and I'll talk a lot more about what APA style requires. However, part two of the question was, what happens if you do it? Well, if Professor Sawyer discovers that you plagiarize, and by the way, teachers are getting much, much better at catching plagiarism. There are all sorts of wonderful websites now where I could feed your words into the system, and they tell me every place those words have come. And I can say, And then we have a conversation, and I say, these are the exact same words that I found a different place. And you say, well, accidents will happen. And I say, I'm going to refer your paper to Dr. Caldwell. And Dr. Caldwell will consider how bad it was. It will go in your record. He may sentence you to come see me, at which time I will be very stern about what kind of errors represent plagiarism. And if you plagiarize more than once, then you're in hot trouble. You can be expelled from Simmons. It can wreck your whole college career. What is the Simmons number? Is it twice or 3 times? But it's a serious offense. And if you try to transfer, that can be on your record. If you're going to graduate school, it can be on your record. And when you get in the business, you still have to worry about plagiarism. You probably don't have to use APA style, but if you use somebody else's statistics on a PowerPoint, you've got to give credit. If you give a speech, you've got to give credit. You can do it gracefully, but you can't take credit for somebody else's words and ideas. If you preach a sermon,
Yeah.
you were doing that, you
Okay.
have to be able to say, well, according to Professor Sawyer at Simmons, this is true. So it's an important concept. How's that?
Thank you.
And Kim, you're sitting there smiling like,
You know what? I will do that the whole ordeal because, and I'm very expressive and I have to go, oh, no, stop. Because I agree and I'm really, really taking in a lot. And yeah, this happens even in the entertainment arena.
it does.
And aside, I've known some very, very, very big comics who have been sued by those who are up and coming because they never think that anyone will believe you that that's your work because I'm who I am. So I totally understand what you're saying and common sense, but I had no idea PowerPoint or speeches, but that makes sense. So I'm learning a
Also-
lot and I'm like, ooh, so you have to excuse me.
Yeah, it happens in music too.
Mhm.
People, there are big lawsuits over people who've the new hit song and somebody else says, no, wait a minute, I wrote that. Or those are my words.
Hello?
Or those are my music.
Mhm.
I'm doing
Plagiarism.
well, sir. How you doing, doctor?
And it's still nasty.
Yes. I emailed you. You should have got an email.
Turn him
Okay,
off.
somebody needs to mute again.
I muted him. Yeah.
Okay, so everybody knows how to reach me, right? Email me, send me your phone number and a time to do it, and I'll do my very best to get back to you when you want. Come see me before you start writing so we can think together. And anytime you get stuck, you can call me, you can email me and we'll have a quick session and try to work on getting you through it. I'm
Oh.
on your team. That's the thing. I'm on your team.
Miss Ellison, may I get your email? I don't think I got it. May I get it, please?
I've got it on the syllabus and on the, rather on this, in the module on the assignment about the web term paper. So you can just look.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, is that good enough? Yeah,
Yes, that works. That works. Okay.
yeah.
So you can always come
Okay.
back and find it. I've got both the Simmons and her personal email are in there. I didn't give
Thank
him,
you for asking. Yeah.
I didn't give him your phone number.
I generally try not to I don't encourage you to call
Right.
because I might be talking to somebody else. I can give you my phone number. It's my cell phone number is 759-7588. And you should know that I just hate my cell phone. have it so that my family can call me in emergencies, or so I can text my nieces and nephews that respond only to text.
Right.
Is it better that we do that, just text you?
No, because I
If we're
don't have
gonna do,
a good relationship with my cell phone.
Email.
I'll not ever be able to retrieve your text.
Email.
okay.
Email
Just email.
many, many times a day. My cell phone, I'm sorry, but I learned a lot of bad words in connection with trying to use my stupid cell phone. And, you know, if you want to get me in a good mood, don't use it. If it's an emergency, of course you should use it. Malik, is this helping at all?
Yes, this is helpful.
Okay, keep in mind that I'm old and I hate cell phone. I hate the cell phone.
You should applaud her because she uses email. That's really good.
That's right.
You've moved into the 20th century.
At least the 20th century. Yeah.
Exactly.
I appreciate your patience with me on that point, because I understand that everybody who's with it can use this cell phone and text. And if you leave a message on my cell phone, I will not get it. I've never figured out how to retrieve a message from my cell phone.
All right.
Sad. It's just sad. That's all you can say.
You are a marvelous resource, and it's like the library. It's not easy to use the library, but it's worth learning how to do it. It's also worth emailing you if we want to get a hold of you.
Well, you know, I'd like to be easier than the library, but
Well, yeah, but
you know, I am what I am. So
that's the analogy.
I appreciate your patience. And Lucretia is just laughing at me. She's just laughing.
It's fun. I remember another writing piece of advice I learned years ago. Excuse me, it really helped me. In addition to the shitty first draft idea, which I always abide by. The other one is never fall in love with anything you've written. Don't fall in love with the words you've chosen, the sentences you've written. They all can be revised and changed and updated and improved. Never fall in love with anything you've written. I'm the worst at it. I was looking again at a book I wrote. I thought, that is really good. Be humble, Sawyer.
Yeah, generally speaking, I find that if I really like something I wrote, it's probably really bad.
Yeah.
And the reason is that words should not call attention to themselves. You know, what should call attention to itself is your writing, your ideas.
Mhm.
And if somebody's paying attention to your words, they might not be getting the whole point. And you've got an idea, and the idea, and my whole goal in working with writers, which you are, is to help people say things that are powerful and effective and clear. And usually that means simplicity.
Yeah. Just because it's clear in my head doesn't mean it's going to be clear in your head. That's the way that works.
Well, so unless somebody has questions, I can get out of the way, because I think you've got more things that you want to do today.
The next thing I'm going to do is talk about the term paper itself. You may want to stay and listen to what
Okay.
what I'm asking folks to do. Are there other questions for Ms. Ellison?
Or complaints. I could, you know, you can complain.
I've been trying to get arguments going in here in this class, and so far no luck. But
You just
what is-
appreciate it greatly.
Yes.
See,
Well, you know, this is what I think. This is, I really enjoy.
Like, I want to contract you for life.
Well, you get me, you know, with your Simmons tuition. It's
yeah, that's right. So here's the deal on this term paper. This is in the syllabus, and I'm showing you a page from the syllabus. It's also on the Canvas website it has its own module called term paper, and under that you can punch that particular spot in, and this will come up, tells you exactly what it is I'm asking for you to do. It is a 5-page written report. And when I say 5 pages, I want it to be, it's not just at least 5 pages. Don't go, 5.5, 6 maybe. I've got 11 of you and I don't need to write lots and lots of papers. I want you to write something that's succinctly done in 5 pages. Actually, 5 pages is pretty easy writing for a college class. It is to be your research on one of the topics of study in this class, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And I'm going to say you can do this individually, or you can always also do this research as a group.
Oh.
If you wanted to do that, it's a little more challenging when we can't do it in person, but there's an option. There are 5 possible topics for this paper. All right. And I've got them here on the board, except you can't see the board if I've got that. There is there too. It's these are topics that are in all but one of them are in the textbook, the pin book, and each of them is a chapter in the pin book. The first one we're going to talk about is Methodism, Black Methodists. That's the AMEs and AME Zions and CMEs primarily. And if you are interested in or have some connection with that particular group, that would be a good one for you to research and find out some more about. The second one is Black Baptists, maybe the largest group of folks in Louisville who are Black Christians or Black Baptists. The third one is Black Pentecostals of many stripes and many denominations. And then the fourth one is Prosperity Ministries. Now, the textbook doesn't actually discuss prosperity ministries. It's actually come along a little more predominant since that book was printed. If you decide to do that, Dr. Brogdon's book, which is in the library or you can get on Kindle, is the essential way to look at that. And then there are other books you can study about that. And the fifth topic is the civil rights and Black Lives movements and the history of those. And there's that's chapter 4 in the pin book. So I want you to pick one of those topics. I want you to decide if you're going to do it by yourself or you want to recruit somebody else, and we'll talk a little bit about what your interests are, and we can talk some more another time, or you can consult with me individually about which ones of those you want to study and dig into. You need to, in order to research this paper, you need to read the chapter in the pin book, and then you need to look at 3 other books or articles that you can find in the college library. Here again, I'm pushing you to get to that library. It is essential if you're to be a college graduate that you know how to, you're comfortable, and it's easy for you to use the library. You can also use other sources, of course. You can use online sources. I prefer you not use Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a wonderful way to get initial information, and it's often wrong. It's not reviewed and carefully. It can be edited by anybody and somebody can put something in there. Other encyclopedias you can get online, Encyclopedia Britannica, and other sources online, and there's a way of citing those things as well. If you find something online, you have to say where you got that, and there's a particular way of quoting that in your citation and in your references. So the textbook and at least 3 other sources got to be in this paper. All right. And then there are basically 5 parts to the paper down here. The paper must include, well, here's the 3 books found in the library in addition to the course book. And so it's just 4 parts. First, a summary of the important dates, places, people, and historical and cultural backgrounds for the development of that particular movement in American Black church history. Okay. The second part is show at least 2 ways that you see the history of that particular movement has influenced current practices of churches you're familiar with or have studied. If the way the AME Zion denomination started, for example, or developed during the 1800s and into the 20th century, what's going on now in that church that is reflective of that, influenced by that, that's kind of set by that kind of history. So this is to get in your head, oh yeah, history, the way it was, affects the way we are now. Third, on the basis of other sources of information, tell what you appreciate and how you would be critical of the course textbook. Because you're going to start by reading the chapter on Penn about if you're studying Methodism, and you can say, well, that's pretty interesting. I've learned a lot about what I didn't know. And other sources may tell you something different than what Ann and Anthony Penn say happened or didn't happen in the Methodist Church. Or it'll have a different emphasis, or it'll tell you something more interesting than they do. Or so, is there anything that makes you wonder whether that's an adequate textbook of dealing with the topic? So criticize the Penn book using the other information you've found. And then, so those are actually it's 3 parts. Summary of the important stuff, the ways you think it's influenced current practices, and how we would use those other influences to critique the Penn book. So those are the 3 parts to a 5-page paper. Finally, your paper must be written in college level style, spell and grammar checked, with proper citations and references of sources used. And I've given you some places and ways to getting at that. And on the Canvas page, I also have Ms. Ellison's email addresses there. That's what that paper is about. It's due April the 16th at 5 p.m. You can send it to me by email, please. And I prefer that it be in a Word document. I still haven't figured out how to open Google Docs. And if you send it to me,
too.
If you send it in PDF, I can read it, but I can't put my comments on it, and you'll lose information that I could give you about the book, the paper. I'm having it, that's at least 2 weeks before the end, 3 weeks before the end of the semester. And that means is after you have worked diligently with Miss Ellison, if I find something in that, your final, quote, final product, that I say, this paper is probably a C. If you do these 2 things, you can at least get a B out of it, or it's a B, and if you do these 3 things, you can get an A out of it. So you have a chance to rewrite it again. You can choose not to, that's fine, but at least that gives us some time for you to do another rewrite. That's the information I think I want to give you about the term paper. What questions or comments do you have about that? Tell me how this is playing.
I was just sitting here thinking a joke after you said that about after seeing Miss Ellison, and then you said the student paper might end up a B. I was sitting here thinking to myself, send a small disclaimer at the bottom of the page asking if you've been hanging out with Dr. Rogers.
Well, he and I are the same generation of old-time professors. I think he's about the same age I am.
Oh, don't get me wrong, I love him.
I know, yeah. Other questions or comments?
Dr. Sawyer, I've got a question, and Miss Ellison,
Go.
if you have wrote or if you have written, Lord have mercy,
Good for
if
you.
you have
Good for you.
written another report and you kind of used a little bit of what you said there, here, do you cite that particular report?
That's a
Or
good
do you
question.
cite, do you recite yourself, or how does that work?
That's a good question. The first thing you do is you talk to your professor and make sure it's okay. Some teachers say, yes, you can use work you've done before, and some teachers say you can't.
Yeah, I would say, a paragraph here or something there, if it's the whole paper. No, I need you to do your own fresh research for this paper so that you can show me you've learned something unique from this class. That's my thing. I need to be able to show to Dr. Brogdon in my evaluation of the class, these students actually learned what I asked them to learn in these ways. So that's why I need you to be doing what I say you're going to do.
Now,
Citing,
when you become a famous historian and are publishing books, then you probably will have to cite your own work. But in the meantime,
right? It's actually kind of cool to cite your own work. As I said in my paper of July 13th, the professor thought was really wonderful.
He's going a little bit too far there, Coach.
It's just, humility, yeah, right. Other questions? That was a good one.
yeah. Malik, you look like you're thinking.
That's what it's supposed to be.
No, I'm good. I already know what my topic is. I'm just gathering my thoughts together.
That's good. That's good.
Critical thinking.
Mm-hmm. Just had that class today too.
So,
Jamal, you okay?
Oh, me? Oh, yes, me.
so what are you thinking, Malik? What do you want to write on?
Well, I think I'm doing Pentecostalism because I knew a little something about it because I was I wasn't raised in Pentecostalism, but when my mom met my dad, he was raised in Pentecostalism, so I was Kojic, so I know something about Church of God in Christ, so
Great. Yeah.
that's what I'm kind of leaning towards.
I was hoping that you would gravitate to something you were already familiar with, and then you could really do some deeper research into it and tie in history with what you already.
Wait, what'd you say, Professor? I'm sorry, Dr. Sawyer. What'd you say?
I'm saying that's good. I like that you've found something you've already have some familiarity with.
Oh, thank you.
Good.
Yes, thank you, bro.
Anybody else have an idea about what you would like to study? Doesn't have to be today, but I'm just curious.
I believe I'm going to stick with Methodists.
Okay.
I think I'm gonna go with Baptist.
Who was
Because
that? Who said that? I didn't see her.
there's a lot still.
I said I'm gonna go with Baptist.
Okay.
There's a lot still on that I feel that I can open up to. We did a little bit of study on it. I don't know if Lucretia remembers it last semester with Reverend Baskin.
Okay.
You know, we only did like a small gloss on it of just two people, but not too in depth with it.
All right. Good. Who else has got an idea that what you want to study?
Excuse me, please. I'm going to have to zoom.
Very good.
I'm
Thank you.
looking forward to seeing you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
She's good. She's good. Okay. Anybody else want to talk about what you're interested in now?
Well, I'm probably going to do Black Baptist, but I am, interested in learning more about the prosperity movement, and but I am Baptist. I think I'm going to stick with Baptist.
Okay, we will be spending a week studying the prosperity movement, and Dr. Brogdon will come to the class and talk about it. So you'll get a chance to dig into it a little bit.
All right.
Okay.
Sure.
Who else? Well,
I still have to give it some thought.
That's fine. That's fine. I know this is just the first time we've heard about it. And then think about whether you want to do it individually as a group. Well, I didn't say the other piece of this is I want you to do your research and give a report that would be part of your paper for the week that we study that in class. So
Say that again.
So I want, if you're studying Methodism, I would like for you to give a brief report about what you're finding beyond what's in the PIN book to the class. So you can be teaching the class about what you've already learned, what you're now learning about the topic at hand. I'll have to go back and see what that's all after the midterm. The Methodists, we study Methodists the week right after midterm break. And then we go to Baptists, then we go to Pentecostals, then we go to Prosperity, and then the Civil Rights Movement. So by choosing Methodists, you put yourself in a bind that's coming up sooner than the other ones. You don't have to have your paper finished, but I need you to do your research and start a report that you can teach the class about it. As I said, it's a whole lot better if you talk than if I talk. Okay.
Dr. Sawyer, I'm gonna go prosperity.
Okay. Cool.
And in this, correct me, but you you don't want an argument. You want me to support this and give the critical pieces that, on like a criticism.
Well, at least based on some research,
Yeah.
here's what the history. It's about the history of it.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, it's not about whether you think it's good or bad necessarily, although you can give some of that as well. But whether it's, but how did it come about? When did it start? Who was involved with it? What happened with that? Was it white folks or black folks who started that? And how has it devolved since then? And how's it's really boomed in the last 20 years, in fact? What's going on?
Right.
That's the history that I want you to catch.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions about the term paper? I want to spend the last 15 minutes getting into the topic for this week. I know you're just chomping at the bits to do that. I don't see any chomping going on. Okay. I'm reading the book here.
Well, the one thing I can say about it, how you pronounce it, Zurara?
Yeah.
Okay. At the beginning of that, I somewhat felt sorry for him.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I was reading, it turned a little bit to anger. It's like dealing with two people, like we say you're a Christian on Sunday, but Monday through Saturday, you're the devil out in the streets.
Right. Yep. Yeah, that's a good analysis of that reading. Well, let me before we get, I'm going to talk more about Zurara's Tears on Wednesday. I want to talk today about getting into my little paper on the historical sources of white supremacy. And if you haven't gotten into that, you can get at that as well as read the other article. for Wednesday. Um, the reason for that paper is that I needed, as a scholar, as a historian, as a white person trying to make sense of what in the world is going on with so much emphasis on white supremacy in this country today. How can that be such a major force that we seem to be stuck on it? And it seems to be a whole lot more than just people's prejudices. We're not talking about racism prejudice here. We're talking about a cultural, system-wide, nationwide, church-wide sense that there's a basic caste system in America, and white folks are at the top. Period. The word that Dr. Kevin Cosby uses for this is it's baked in. He says, I heard him say this in a speech. I can't cite it exactly, but I heard him say, if you bake a cake and you forgot to put in the sugar, when you taste the cake, you'll immediately know there's not enough sugar in this cake, but it's too late. It's already baked. That's true about white supremacy. The notion of white superiority in all things, for all seasons, for all time, is baked into the American culture. How did that come to be? Now, in order to get at that, I dug way back into history. I actually started with the Christian Imagination book that the Zurara's Tears chapter is in. That was where I began to say, oh, I begin to see how that goes all the way back to the colonial times.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that story is told shows how that was. But the historical precedents that led up to the king and crown prince of Portugal to be able to say, with the Pope's blessing, it's okay for us to go down there to Africa and conquer their countries and take back slaves and steal all their resources. How did they get to that? How can that be possible? So in that paper, I've got 4 basic concepts, and I put them on the board here. I don't know whether you can read that or not. They're in the paper as well. The first one is maybe the biggest word you've learned in college so far. Maybe unless it was in one of your science classes. It's called supersessionism.
Mm-hmm.
Supersessionism. It was a really nifty trick that the Europeans adopted when they began. I told you last week that Christianity thrived in Asia and Africa first, and it was a afterthought in Europe, and then at the time of Charlemagne, Charles the Great, it surged into power, and Charlemagne basically enforced all of Europe to become Catholic. But in the process, the Europeans had gathered this idea that they were the chosen people of God. How did that happen? They read the Bible, and they read the New Testament has suggestions of this, but it's not a correct
You act like we don't have no more classes with George.
They read the fact that in particular in the Gospel of John and other places, the Jews were critical of Jesus. And in some of Paul's writing, it talks about how the Christianity has become a precious thing to God. And what they interpret that is that the Jews rejected Jesus, which is partly true, although there's a whole lot of history and all that that goes beyond what the Gospels say, and that therefore God has rejected the Jews, who were the chosen people, who no longer are because they rejected the Messiah, Jesus as Messiah. Therefore, the white Christians of Europe, who are the successors to the Jesus movement, are the new chosen people. That's supersessionism, super meaning over, beyond, and session means to replace or to separate out. They believe that the Old Testament is fine as the Old Testament, but the New Testament, they would even call the New Testament because there's this new covenant with God, between God and Christians, that makes them the new chosen people. This is actually a scriptural error, but it has taken hold. I bet you have heard a preacher at some point talking about how the Jews are no longer in favor with God because they didn't accept Jesus. And then they go back and read all of the scriptures of the Old Testament as if it only points to Jesus. Well, you see, this prophecy is all about Jesus. Well, probably not. It can be attributed to the characteristics of Jesus because he was a Jewish prophet and rabbi, but that wasn't what they were thinking about. Look at that chapter. Look at all the stuff Moses was just thinking about Jesus. No, that is part of the history of the people of God. That is our history with God, the Old Testament and the New Testament. But supersessionism is the way Europeans became, in their own minds, the chosen people. And these are white folks. Now the second, that's a nifty trick if you can pull it off, and they pulled it off for 2,000 years. The second trick they pulled, and I think I may have mentioned this last week, and it's called erasure. And that is, although many of the early saints were African, Jesus and the apostles were Jewish people of Palestine, of the Middle East, Asian characters by geography, and brown of skin, bronze and brown of skin. And many of the early paintings and icons and pictures and statues of the first 2 or 3 centuries of the Common Era after Jesus showed them with nappy hair and large features of face and different kinds of physiques that more suggests the African and Western Europe, Western Asian characteristics. At some point, thanks to partly to supersessionism and partly to the growing pride of whiteness, they went back through and changed those pictures and those statues. They whitewashed them literally. They drew beards on the women bishops because they no longer thought women could be leaders of the church. All of that happened by erasure. And the implication was that whiteness is better than brownness and blackness. That's where it's beginning to get baked into the European culture and the European church.
I found that very enlightening that you had put that in your paper about how they had put beards on women.
Yeah.
And I had to look up this word because I never heard this word before. In your paper, it's presbyter.
Yeah.
Okay, I never heard that word.
Presbyter, yeah.
Yeah, I had to look that up because I'm like, okay, what is this? But I found it very enlightening that you put that in that paper.
Yeah.
Because to paint over how how you described it in there and placing beards on women to erase any content that there were any female spiritual leaders.
Yep, any brown, black, or female, exactly. The word presbyter was the Greek word for elders, or ministers and leaders of the church. And there were men and women presbyters in the early church in Southern Europe, as well as other places all along. That word gets carried into one of the major white denominations of America called Presbyterians. And I are one of those.
But I've seen the pictures of the women with the beard, but I never understood why they had beard. I was just, like, why that lady got a beard? But now I understood why. Once you said it in our last class, it made sense. Like, oh.
Now, there may have been other motivations. We don't know. This was, 200 of the Common Era, or 300 of the Common Era. We don't know for sure. But my guess as a historian, as a theologian, is that was an intentional way to put women in their place.
Mm-hmm.
Because women need to be put in their place. We know this.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Dear God.
Don't do that.
Yeah, because God's the guy, so it's okay.
Dr. Sawyer, you're on your own with that one.
I know what I'm doing.
I'm gonna go ahead and hit the mute button right now. I'm hitting the mute.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Sorry, excuse me.
Go ahead.
Isn't that why when in the Bible that says Paul said that you should submit yourselves to your wives, to your women? That then the women were supposed to have been in their own place?
Yeah, the women are supposed to submit to the husbands, right? Yeah, and Paul said that. He was a part of that erasure process. He was a man of his time. And how do you discern that in terms of whether if that's in the Bible, does that make it law? Or do we have to judge it with other parts of the Bible? How did Jesus approach women? Who were some of his closest friends and disciples? They weren't apostles.
Mary Magdalene.
Yeah.
Women.
Yeah.
Well, there was two or three instances that come to mind to me where he had spoke to women and his disciples were always like,
right.
why are you talking to this woman or that woman?
One of those was a Samaritan woman.
That's
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
She's not only a woman, but she's a foreigner, a pagan.
And Deborah, she said God told her to lead the army. So.
And right. Gideon, yes.
You have
back in that time in the. So where am I at?
Because you have that instance right after his death, when a woman was the first one he spoke to.
Sure.
Yeah.
She was the first one that brought the gospel to everybody else.
Right? Yes.
What, Gary, what were you getting ready to say?
In Judges is where she was talking about Deborah was one of the leaders that God had put in lead to be one of the judges of that time, to be able to lead the people whenever they was disobedient. And when they came back to God, they would always holler they needed somebody to take care of them, and she was the judge over all of them.
Right. So here's the biblical interpretation, and if you're a religious studies major, you'll eventually take the Bible interpretation or hermeneutics class. But one of the principles of hermeneutics, you interpret the Bible with other parts of the Bible. If there's a contradiction, which is the more predominant? Which is more the spirit of the God we know in the Bible and of Jesus. And that's how you say, well, there was Deborah. Yeah, there was Mary Magdalene, who was the first preacher of the gospel, and so on and so forth. So anyway, well, that's a rabbit trail we can go down. So yeah, those two concepts were the beginning of how white supremacy, white male supremacy, began to take hold of European Christianity. And we'll talk some more about, and the paper talks about how that got translated into white Protestant, Anglo-Saxons, and who came to America and instilled that whole thing in American culture. And America becomes the promised land, the new promised land that we as white people can do anything we want to with it, because God has given it to
Doctor,
us.
excuse me.
Yes,
Okay, is it's similar to the manifest destiny that they thought that they could conquer new worlds and do whatever they wanted to do
exactly
in those new worlds?
Yep. That's all part of that being baked in. Exactly. All right. We're going to keep talking about this, and that's in that paper. And then if you haven't read Zurara's Tears, it's not an easy read, but it's very important to the picture I want you to have in your mind. I want you to have a sense of what is this thing that the Black population of America has had to struggle with, continues to struggle with. What's the historical process that made that happen? This is a history lesson. And these terms, I would need you to remember: supersessionism and erasure, and all that business. Okay. I'll see you Wednesday at 1:00. Thank you all for being here. It's wonderful to have a full class. Yay.
We'll see you Wednesday.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Have a great evening.
Yep.